My name is Margaret, I'm 58, and just weeks ago, my son told me I wasn't welcome at his graduation. After decades of sacrifice, late nights cleaning offices, working weekends, and giving him every cent I had, he looked me in the eye and said, "Don't come." I don't want people to know you're my mother. The sting of those words nearly broke me. Friends posted their family pictures online, while I sat alone with nothing but silence and shame. But what my son didn't know was that I held a secret, one that would turn his new life upside down. If you think you know where this story goes, stay with me, because the ending is nothing like you expect. Make sure you subscribe and watch until the very end. This is a story of betrayal, justice, and a mother's dignity reclaimed. My name is Margaret, and I never imagined I would be telling this story. For most of my life, I believed that sacrifice was the purest form of love. I thought if I gave enough, my time, my strength, my money, then my son would grow into the kind of man who would honor me. Instead, I found myself erased. I raised Daniel alone from the time he was 3. His father walked out one winter morning with nothing but a suitcase, leaving me with rent overdue and a toddler clinging to my leg. There was no child support, no family inheritance, no safety net. There was just me, a stack of bills, and the quiet determination that my son would never feel the same abandonment I did. I took every job I could find. By day, I cleaned classrooms at the elementary school. By night, I checked groceries at the supermarket until my back ached so badly I could hardly stand. Later, I added weekend shifts scrubbing offices downtown. My hands were raw, my feet blistered, but Daniel never saw that. I made sure he had new shoes, hot meals, and a stack of library books taller than him. In the corner of my bedroom closet sat a faded shoebox. Inside it, I tucked away every receipt, every tuition bill, every proof of sacrifice. I told myself it was just for record-keeping, but in truth, it became my silent diary. Each crumpled paper whispered, "This is what you gave up. This is what you endured." Someday, I imagined showing Daniel the box, not to guilt him, but so he would understand that nothing in his life had come easily. Daniel was bright from the start. By middle school, teachers praised him as college material. He stayed up late doing science projects while I brewed another pot of coffee to keep myself awake beside him. I remember one night vividly. The rain leaked through the kitchen ceiling, and while I caught water in a pot, he explained how he'd one day design better housing so no mother had to live like that again. I clung to that dream. Money was always tight, but I cut corners quietly. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years. I patched the lining with duct tape and sewed buttons back on with mismatched thread. Vacations never existed. Our outings were dollar movie nights or walks by the river. Birthdays meant homemade cakes, and Christmas gifts were often secondhand finds wrapped with care. Yet Daniel never seemed ashamed of it, at least not then. He would grin wide when I lit a candle on a single cupcake and tell me it was perfect. The closer he came to high school graduation, the more determined I became. I squirreled away money in envelopes hidden under the shoebox. When college application fees arrived, I counted every dollar twice before mailing them. I told Daniel not to worry about finances, that I had it handled. The truth was, I was drowning. But I would rather sink quietly than let him feel 1 ounce of limitation. When the acceptance letter came from a prestigious university hours away, I cried like a child. It was the proudest day of my life. Neighbors patted me on the back and said, "You did it." They didn't realize how literal that was. I had done it. I had carried him on my shoulders to that moment. The first year, Daniel called home often. He told me about classes, roommates, and cafeteria food. He sent pictures of the campus lawn in autumn, gold leaves swirling around brick buildings. My heart swelled each time his name appeared on my phone. But slowly, the calls grew shorter. Then they became texts. Then silence stretched between us. I told myself he was busy. I told myself independence was healthy. Still, a small ache began to gnaw inside me. When he came home for holidays, I noticed changes. His clothes were nicer, his shoes brand new. He spoke differently, his words sharper, his tone impatient, as if I couldn't keep up. Once, while visiting a neighbor, I overheard him downplay our life, brushing off the struggles we had endured. It stung, but I smiled through it, pretending not to hear. I remembered the warning from my cousin Elaine. One evening, as I folded laundry, she said, "Don't pour everything into him, Margaret. Children forget the hands that fed them." I had laughed then, brushing her off. "Not Daniel," I insisted. "He knows what I've done." But now I wasn't so sure. By his 3rd year, he barely came home at all. He said summers were for internships, networking, building his future. I believed him, though I couldn't ignore the way my heart clenched when he chose everyone else over me. Still, I paid every bill. Dorm fees, lab fees, textbooks that cost more than a week of groceries. Each receipt went into the shoebox, the stack rising higher, heavier. It wasn't resentment that made me keep them. It was proof of love. Proof that his achievements were built on a foundation no one else could see. As graduation neared, I began to dream of that day. I pictured myself in the audience, clapping until my hands stung as his name was called. I imagined snapping photos, hugging him in his cap and gown, saying, "We did it." Because in my heart, it was never just him. It was always us. But small clues unsettled me. He dodged my questions about ceremony tickets. He spoke vaguely about plans, parties, and people being there. He never said me. The silence grew heavier. My shoebox in the closet seemed to whisper each night, "Don't forget what you've given." I didn't know then that my years of sacrifice would be met with rejection so sharp it would cut me deeper than any hardship I had faced. The moment that shattered everything came one quiet evening in late spring. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the shoebox of bills resting near my elbow, when I finally picked up the phone to call Daniel. Graduation was only weeks away, and I hadn't heard anything concrete from him. When he answered, his voice was brisk, distracted. I could hear laughter in the background, the clink of glasses. "Hey, Mom. Can we make this quick? I'm with friends." I smiled into the phone anyway. "I just wanted to ask about graduation. I'll need the date and time so I can plan the trip. I've already started saving for the bus ticket and hotel." Silence. For a second, I thought the line had gone dead. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "About that, I don't think you should come." The words didn't land right away. I laughed nervously, trying to fill the space. "What do you mean?" "Of course I'm coming. It's your graduation." He sighed, long and heavy, the way he used to when he was a boy, and I asked him to clean his room. "Mom, I don't want you there. It's not your place." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles whitening. "Not my place?" My voice cracked. "Daniel, I've been waiting for this day since you were born. I worked myself half to death so you could walk across that stage." His tone hardened. "You don't get it. My friends, my professors, they don't know about our life. They don't know I grew up in a run-down apartment with a mom who cleaned offices at night. I don't want them to. This is my moment, and I don't want to explain you." The words pierced me deeper than any knife. I pressed a hand against my chest, as if I could hold my heart together. "Explain me?" I whispered. "Please don't make this harder," he muttered. "Just stay home." "It's better this way." Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to scream, to demand gratitude, to tell him about the shoebox of receipts that sat only inches away from my trembling hand. Instead, I asked softly, "After everything I've done, do you really see me as something to hide?" On the other end, there was only silence. Then he said flatly, "You were the wallet, Mom. Don't confuse that with being part of my life here." The line clicked dead. For a long time, I sat frozen at the table. The shoebox stared back at me, the receipts inside rustling as though alive with accusation. Every crumpled paper represented another hour, another shift, another piece of myself I had given up. All for this? To be cast aside as if I were nothing more than an embarrassing footnote? The next morning, neighbors stopped by asking about travel plans. "You must be so proud, Mrs. Stroh." Keen said brightly, clutching my arm, "Will you take lots of pictures?" I forced a smile. "Of course," I lied. Inside, shame burned like fire. How could I admit that my only son had barred me from the very day I had sacrificed everything to reach? That night, I pulled the shoebox from the closet and set it on the bed. I lifted each slip of paper, each bill, and read the numbers like gravestones. Rent past due. Utility disconnection notices. credit card statements marked minimum payment, and alongside them, tuition bills stamped paid in full. I whispered into the dark, all for nothing. But as I sat there, something inside me shifted. My son believed I was invisible. He believed I had no place in his new world. What he didn't know was that I still held power, quiet but real. Power he had never bothered to see. I closed the shoebox gently and slid it back into the closet. For now, I would stay silent. But the seed of resolve had been planted, and it would grow into something he could never ignore. After that phone call, the days stretched like shadows. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner for one, and tried to sleep, but every sound seemed to echo with his words. "You were the wallet." They spun in my head until I thought I might go mad. I needed answers. I needed to understand how my son, the boy who once promised to build me a house without leaks, could look at me as if I were just a stain on his reputation. The following weekend, I boarded a bus to his college town without telling him. My hands trembled as I clutched the ticket, the way they had trembled when I held his kindergarten enrollment form years ago. Back then, I was nervous with hope. Now, I was nervous with dread. The campus rose like a different world. Red brick buildings, students with polished shoes and easy laughter, cars gleaming in the parking lot. I felt like a ghost drifting among them, unseen, unworthy. I found the dorm where Daniel lived. The building was tall, ivy creeping up the sides, the kind of place that looked historic and important. I stood across the street for a long time, watching students come and go, carrying books, coffee cups, and bags from stores I couldn't afford to enter. Then I saw him, my son. He stepped out of the front door with a group of friends. He wore a pressed button-down shirt, designer sneakers, and a jacket that must have cost more than my month's rent. My heart lurched. These were not things I had bought him. I ducked behind a lamppost, ashamed of myself but unwilling to be seen. He laughed loudly, tossing his head back, the picture of confidence. "My mom? Oh, she's not around," I heard him say when one of the boys asked about his family. The words hit me like a stone. He spoke as though I were dead. I followed them at a distance, keeping my head down. They went into a cafe near campus, a bright place with high ceilings and glass windows. I pressed close to the window, my breath fogging the glass as I strained to hear. Inside, one of the friends joked about their parents paying rent. Daniel smirked. "Not me. I've been handling things on my own for years." The others nodded with admiration, and Daniel basked in it, not once acknowledging the mother who had worked herself raw to give him that independence. I pulled back from the window, my chest heaving. Rage bubbled inside me, but beneath it was something colder, heavier, resolve. I walked aimlessly through the campus streets, trying to calm my mind. That was when I noticed a flyer posted on a bulletin board outside the student union. Historic dorm property under consideration for sale. Inquire with building manager. My eyes locked on the words as though fate itself had taped them there for me. A dorm property. His dorm. I tore off one of the tabs at the bottom of the flyer and slipped it into my purse. The next day, I returned and asked the front desk if the building manager was available. An older man in a tweed jacket met me in the lobby. His name was Mr. Harris, and his handshake was firm, his eyes kind. "Are you here about the sale?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. I just wanted to know more. He explained that the university was shifting resources, that the property was technically privately owned, and that it would soon be available for purchase. His tone was casual, but my pulse raced. As he spoke, I saw something in my mind. Daniel strutting through these halls, dismissing me as irrelevant, never realizing that the very roof over his head might one day belong to me. When Mr. Harris handed me a glossy real estate brochure, I slid it into my purse as though it were a holy text. That night in my motel room, I spread it open on the bed. The building's photograph stared back at me, solid and grand. I smoothed the pages flat with trembling hands, a gesture that felt almost ceremonial. I didn't make any decisions that night. I simply lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the brochure on the pillow beside me. But the seed planted during that first phone call was now pushing through the soil. Before leaving town, I returned to the dorm once more. I waited until evening, when students gathered in the common room. Through the window, I saw Daniel again. He was laughing with friends, tossing a football back and forth. On the wall behind him hung the framed invitation for the graduation ceremony. His friends were passing it around, making plans, while my name had never been written on one. The ache inside me deepened, but it also sharpened into something useful. Pain has a way of either breaking you or forging you. That night, I decided it would forge me. I returned home carrying the real estate brochure like a secret weapon. I didn't tell anyone, not Elaine, not the neighbors. This was mine alone. Over the following weeks, I researched everything I could. I stayed late at the library, reading about property laws, mortgages, and financing. I called banks during my lunch breaks, pretending I was just curious, when in truth, my heart thundered with every conversation. Meanwhile, Daniel's silence grew louder. He didn't call, didn't text. On social media, I saw pictures of him in suits at networking events, his arms slung around new friends. In one photo, he held a champagne glass, his caption boasting, "Made it on my own." Each word fueled the fire. He thought I was gone, erased, but I was still here. And I was planning something he would never forget. The shoebox in my closet grew heavier in my mind. I would sit at night with it on my lap, the real estate brochure tucked beside it, as though the two were connected. One represented everything I had already given. The other, everything I was about to take back. I didn't yet know exactly how or when or even if I could truly pull it off. But I knew this much. My son had hidden me from his world. Soon, he would learn what it meant to be invisible no longer. The truth revealed itself in the smallest, cruelest ways. A week after I returned from my secret trip, I decided to clean Daniel's old bedroom. It hadn't been touched in months, and dust coated the shelves where his childhood trophies still stood. I opened his desk drawer to sort through old papers, and tucked between a stack of notebooks, I found something that made my chest tighten, a graduation invitation. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Gold-embossed lettering, elegant script, exactly the kind of thing I had imagined receiving. Only this one wasn't addressed to me. It was for a professor. Later, I found another envelope nearby, this time addressed to one of his college friends. But there was no envelope with my name. None. I sat on the edge of his bed, the invitation fluttering in my hands. My throat burned with the realization he had chosen to invite others, but not the woman who had built his entire future. That night, when Daniel finally called, likely out of obligation, not love, I confronted him. My voice was calm, but my hands clenched the phone so hard they ached. "I found the invitations," I said. "You sent them to professors, friends, but not to me." On the other end, silence. Then, a sigh. "Mom, don't do this." "Don't do what?" My voice trembled. "Don't notice I've been erased? Don't acknowledge that you're ashamed of me?" Finally, his tone hardened. "You don't understand. People here, they see me as someone successful, someone who rose above. If they knew the truth, if they saw you." He stopped himself, but the damage was done. I closed my eyes, feeling the words cut deeper than any blade. "If they saw me, they'd see the woman who made your success possible." His reply was cold, practiced. "No, Mom. They'd see the woman I outgrew." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The silence stretched until I thought I would collapse under its weight. Then, softly, I said, "You erased me." He didn't deny it. He didn't even apologize. Instead, he said, "It's better this way," and hung up. I stared at the dark phone screen, my reflection warped in the glass. My son, the boy I had given everything for, had decided I was nothing more than a chapter he wished to skip. That was when the decision solidified. It wasn't enough to ache quietly in my own home, to keep the shoebox of bills as my only proof. I needed something real, something undeniable. I walked to my closet, pulled out the real estate brochure, and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The glossy paper reflected the light like a mirror, and I saw my own tired face staring back. My hands smoothed the page as though sealing a vow. If he wanted me invisible, I would become impossible to ignore. That was the moment I crossed from hurt into action. It wasn't revenge, I told myself that. It was justice. a balancing of the scales. For years, I had poured into him without question. Now, I would reclaim a piece of myself. The first reveal wasn't about him. It was about me, the realization that my son didn't just forget me, he deliberately chose to bury me. That knowledge burned, but it also gave me clarity. I wasn't just his wallet. I wasn't just the woman he wanted to hide. I was still his mother. And whether he admitted it or not, everything he had was built on the foundation I had laid brick by brick. He might have erased me from his invitations, his stories, even his identity. But soon he would learn that erasing me from his life came with a price he never expected to pay. Graduation day came and went without me. I stayed home, the shoebox of bills on the coffee table like an unwanted guest. On my phone, relatives posted smiling pictures of their children in caps and gowns. Neighbors asked if I had cried tears of joy. I lied, nodding, pretending I was proud from afar. Inside, humiliation roared like fire. My son had walked across that stage, his friends cheering, while I sat alone in silence, not even allowed in the same room. But while he was celebrating, I was already planning. The week after the ceremony, I called Mr. Stack. Harris, the building manager. My voice was steady, though my hand shook. "Yes," I said, "I'd like to discuss the purchase." He invited me to his office, a modest room filled with filing cabinets and the smell of old paper. He spread documents across the desk, explaining the process, the financing, the inspections. Each word sounded heavy, impossible. But I listened carefully, nodding, making notes in a small spiral notebook. At home, I pulled out the shoebox again, not for the pain this time, but for calculation. Each receipt, each bill, was evidence of years of discipline. And tucked beneath them were savings bonds, small inheritances from my parents, a few investments I had made quietly, carefully. My fortune wasn't vast, but it was enough to become leverage. Still, it wasn't easy. Banks questioned me. One loan officer glanced at my work history and frowned. "You don't exactly fit the profile of a property owner." I straightened my back, meeting his eyes. "Profiles don't pay mortgages. People do." Eventually, with persistence and no small amount of pleading, I secured what I needed. I drained accounts I had been saving for retirement, signed agreements that made my stomach twist, and took on risks I never imagined. But every time doubt whispered, I thought of Daniel's words, "You were the wallet." No, I was more than that. Weeks passed in a blur of signatures and inspections. Each time I returned to the dorm for another meeting with Mr. Monk. Harris. I walked the halls quietly, observing. Students laughed in the lounge, sprawled on couches with laptops and coffee. Their chatter filled the air, and somewhere among them, Daniel lived comfortably, unaware that the ground beneath him was shifting. I never approached him. I never revealed myself. My presence there was like a shadow, invisible but constant. Finally, the day came when the deal closed. "Mr. Moore." Harris slid a velvet pouch across the desk, inside of which were a set of heavy brass keys. My hands trembled as I lifted them, the metal cold and solid in my palm. For years, my life had been defined by receipts and bills, by what I gave away. Now, for the first time, I held something permanent. Something mine. I walked out of that office into the summer air, the keys jingling softly, almost musically. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt taller, steadier, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been set down. Still, I didn't rush. I waited. I let the summer stretch on, my ownership quiet, undisclosed. Daniel called once or twice, always briefly, always distracted. He spoke about job interviews, about networking dinners, never once asking about me. He didn't know that with every word he spoke from a place I now controlled. When the time came to finalize the paperwork on the tenants, I sat at my kitchen table, drafting the new rental agreements. I wasn't cruel. The rent increase was fair, aligned with market prices. But for many students, including Daniel, it would mean finding part-time work or tightening their budgets. It was reality, not charity. For years, I had bent my back to make his life easier. Now, he would learn the weight of responsibility. I mailed out the notices, my hand steady this time. I imagined the envelopes landing in mailboxes, the surprise on students' faces, the frustration, the scrambling, and among them, my son opening his letter, reading the new terms, never expecting the signature at the bottom to belong to me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the shoebox of bills now replaced on the table by the deed. For so long, I had been invisible. Soon, I would no longer be ignored. The confrontation was inevitable. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but I knew it was coming. And this time, when Daniel faced me, he would not see a wallet or an embarrassment to hide. He would see a woman who had taken back her dignity. As the days passed and the deadline for new rent payments drew closer, I felt the tension coil tighter inside me. My phone remained silent. No word from Daniel, but I knew the silence would break. It had to, and when it did, I would be ready with the deed in one hand and the keys in the other. The first phone call came 3 days after the notices went out. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit up the screen. My hands froze, water dripping from the sponge. For a moment I thought of letting it ring, of savoring the silence I had endured for so long, but something inside me wanted to hear his voice. "Hello?" My tone was calm, almost detached. "Mom." His voice was sharp, laced with anger. "Did you hear about this? They're raising the rent at my dorm." "It's ridiculous. Everyone's freaking out." I swallowed a laugh. "Oh? That sounds stressful. You don't get it," he snapped. "I can't afford this. None of us can. I might have to move out. Do you know how impossible that would be right now? I'm job hunting. I'm networking. I don't have time for this." I let the silence stretch. Then softly I asked, "Do you know who owns your dorm now?" He scoffed. "Some greedy landlord, I guess." My hand tightened around the phone. "That greedy landlord is me." For a long moment, nothing. Just his breath on the other end, uneven and shallow. Then, finally, "What are you talking about?" I took a slow breath. "I bought your building, Daniel. Every brick, every lock, every hallway you walk down. And the notice you received? That was from me." His voice broke into a harsh laugh. "You're lying. You can't even—" "I can," I interrupted, firm. And I did. The deed is in my name. I hold the keys. The silence that followed was thicker than anything I'd ever known. I could almost hear the gears in his mind grinding, the disbelief colliding with the truth. You're insane," he stammered finally. "Why would you do that? Why would you ruin my life like this?" I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. For years I had swallowed his insults, accepted his dismissal. But not this time. "I didn't ruin your life, Daniel. I gave you one. Every opportunity you've had, every class, every meal, every shirt on your back. I made that possible. And when you told me I wasn't good enough to sit at your graduation, I realized something. You don't respect me. You never have. So I stopped waiting for you to see my worth. I claimed it myself." He exhaled sharply, disbelief still spilling out of him. "You can't just control me like this. I'm not controlling you," I said, my tone steady. "I'm teaching you. For years, I shielded you from struggle. I wanted you to have what I didn't. But you turned my sacrifices into shame. Now, you'll learn what responsibility feels like. You'll pay your way, like everyone else." His anger flared. "This is revenge. Admit it." I hesitated. "Revenge? Maybe. But it was more than that. It was reclamation." "Call it whatever you like," I answered, "but I won't apologize for taking back my dignity." The call ended abruptly. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone still in my hand, and let out a long breath. My knees felt weak, but my chest was steady. The confrontation had begun. That week, I visited the dorm for the first time as owner. I walked the halls openly, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors. Students glanced at me, some with curiosity, some with irritation. They whispered about the rent hike, about the new landlord. In the common lounge, I saw Daniel. He was pacing, his face red, his gestures sharp as he ranted to his friends. They nodded sympathetically, hanging on his every word. Then his eyes landed on me. The room froze. He stormed toward me, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, it's true. You actually did this." I met his fury with calm. "Yes, Daniel. I did." The students around us fell silent, their eyes bouncing between us. For the first time, Daniel couldn't hide me. I wasn't a secret. I wasn't a shadow. "You've embarrassed me," he shouted. "Do you know how this looks? My own mother, owning my dorm, raising rent, treating me like some tenant." I tilted my head, voice steady. "It looks like the truth. You wanted to erase me, Daniel, but here I am. Everyone can see exactly who I am and who you are." He faltered then, his anger colliding with the reality that every eye in the room was watching. His friends exchanged confused glances. A few even seemed impressed. "You've ruined everything," he muttered, but his voice lacked the fire it had carried moments before. "No," I said softly, "I've only begun to set things right." The days that followed were tense. Daniel avoided me, his pride forcing him into silence. But I knew the pressure was building. Rent day was approaching, and he would have to choose, accept the terms, or confront me again. On the first of the month, he came to my office, the small space, Mr. Spen. Harris had once used, now bearing my name on the door. He entered without knocking, his face pale, his jaw set. "I can't pay this," he said, slamming the notice on my desk. I looked at him calmly. "Then you'll need to find another place to live." His eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said. "And I will, if you can't respect the same responsibilities everyone else carries. This isn't about you, Daniel. It's about fairness. I won't treat you differently because you're my son." He sank into the chair opposite me, his bravado crumbling. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the proud, untouchable young man who had pushed me aside. He looked like a boy again, lost, desperate. "Why are you doing this to me?" he whispered. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "Because you need to understand. The world doesn't revolve around you. And neither do I. I loved you enough to sacrifice everything. But I love myself enough now to stop being invisible." Tears welled in his eyes, though he blinked them back quickly. He shook his head, unable to answer. The silence between us was heavy, but it wasn't empty. For the first time, he was listening. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen again, the brass keys spread out on the table before me. They gleamed in the dim light, symbols of everything I had endured and everything I had reclaimed. The confrontation wasn't over far from it, but something had shifted. Daniel had seen me, truly seen me, not as the wallet, not as the shame, but as a force he couldn't dismiss, and I knew the reckoning was only just beginning. The weeks after our confrontation were quiet, almost eerily so. Daniel stopped calling, stopped storming into my office, stopped fighting me in public. At first, I thought he was ignoring me, shutting me out the way he always had. But then, little by little, signs began to appear that something inside him was shifting. One afternoon, I received an envelope slipped under my office door. Inside was his rent payment, every cent accounted for, signed in his hand. No angry notes, no sarcastic comments, just payment. I held the envelope for a long time, staring at his familiar handwriting. For years, I had begged him for acknowledgement. Now, here it was, not in words, but in action. I didn't waive his rent. I didn't make special allowances. I treated him like every other tenant. It wasn't about the money, it was about principle. And Daniel knew it. Around campus, the whispers about me changed. At first, I was the crazy mom who bought the dorm. But as time passed, people saw how I ran the place, fairly, consistently, without favoritism. I repaired broken lights, replaced old locks, and listened when students brought me concerns. Slowly, respect replaced ridicule. Even some of Daniel's friends began to greet me with nods, with small smiles. I wasn't just his mom anymore. I was the landlord, the woman who stood her ground. And then came the graduation I had once been banned from. The ceremony was held in a large hall, packed with proud families. I didn't sit in the audience. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood quietly near the back, my hands clasped, watching as rows of students filed across the stage. When Daniel's name was called, my breath caught. He stepped forward, tall in his cap and gown. For a moment he hesitated, scanning the crowd. And then his eyes found me. He froze. His lips parted slightly, as though he wanted to say something. Then he gave the smallest nod, barely perceptible, but real. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was recognition. Tears stung my eyes as he crossed the stage, shaking hands, accepting his diploma. For the first time, I didn't feel left out. I felt seen. After the ceremony, I didn't wait for him to come to me. I turned and walked away, keys jangling softly in my pocket. This wasn't about forcing him to love me or begging for his approval. This was about reclaiming the dignity I had nearly lost. A week later, he came to my office again. This time, he knocked before entering. "I'm moving out," he said simply. I nodded. "That's your choice." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to. Thank you for everything." Even if I didn't show it, I looked at him, my son who had hurt me so deeply, who had finally started to see beyond himself. "You're welcome, Daniel. I hope you'll remember what it costs when someone gives everything for you." His eyes flickered, guilt and humility warring inside him. For the first time in years, his voice softened. "I will." He left after that, but his words stayed with me. Life returned to its rhythm. I continued managing the dorm, balancing accounts, repairing what was broken. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My name was on the deed. My hands held the keys. And every day I walked those halls, I reminded myself, I wasn't invisible anymore. The pain of Daniel's betrayal hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was strength. The strength to stand on my own, to demand respect, to never again shrink into the shadows. Sometimes I'd pass Daniel's old room, now rented to another student, and feel a pang, but it was quickly replaced by pride. I had faced the darkest rejection a mother could endure, and I had come out standing taller. In the end, this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about dignity, about reminding myself and him that love without respect is not love at all. And though Daniel and I still had a long road ahead, I knew one thing for certain: he would never again forget who I was or what I had sacrificed. I had carved my place into his life in a way he could never erase, not as a victim, not as a silent shadow, but as a woman who refused to be dismissed. When I look back, I realized the hardest part wasn't being told I couldn't attend my son's graduation. The hardest part was feeling like my years of sacrifice had meant nothing. I thought love alone was enough, but love without respect becomes invisible, and that invisibility almost destroyed me. Buying the dorm wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming the dignity I had given away piece by piece. For years, I let myself believe I had to stay quiet, accept whatever scraps of acknowledgement Daniel offered. But dignity isn't something you beg for, it's something you protect, fiercely, even from the people you love most. Daniel still has a lot to learn, and so do I. Our relationship isn't magically healed, but the balance has shifted. He knows now that I am not disposable, and I know that sometimes the only way to teach respect is to demand it. If you've ever felt dismissed, forgotten, or pushed aside by someone you gave your life to, let my story remind you your worth doesn't vanish because someone else fails to see it. And if you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like mine aren't easy to tell, but they matter because they're real. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. And please, share in the comments, what would you have done if your own child shut you out like mine did?